Jeepers. We're a diverse lot. How we use our Jeeps on any given day is all over the place. For some, it's all about the rocks, ledges, and broken parts. I mean, if it takes 4 hours to bounce and grind through a 100-yard trail, that's perfect. But what's interesting is that we all go through phases. Today it's rocks, tomorrow it's time to cover some ground and take in some history. This is a Jeep trip unlike any we've experienced. We just stepped away from the tour bus and onto the actual roads and ranches and hideouts that made the legends that shaped the Wild West.
We as 307 Adventures, what we like to do is take people out in their Jeeps, give them that opportunity to see the stuff that not a lot of people would take the time to go out and check out.
Before we left town, we hit the Thermopolis Museum. Now, I'm not usually a big museum guy, but this place was amazing. It was a great way to start our trip. We would actually be seeing the areas we learned about in the museum when we hit the trail.
Well, those that would be familiar with the Wild Bunch gang, this bar that we are fortunate enough to be standing in and around here, this was purchased and brought in from overseas. Amazing, this cash register. Can you imagine the different people that have punched those keys?
You know, I can almost see old Butch and Sundance pounding a brew here. But the times, they were a-changing. They must have felt it. The courts and the corporate world were moving past the lawless days. The railroad brought in a new group of mercenaries, gave them badges, and tasked them with finding and ending the robberies and the endless losses. They were on their trail.
You're beginning to get on my nerves. Who are those guys?
You've heard of hired justice? Yeah, bring on the Pinkertons. Staffed by former outlaws, they would put an end to the wild in the Wild West. The line between outlaws and heroes can get pretty vague and fuzzy. We start at the Thermopolis Hot Springs. Recently, the largest hot springs on Earth. Has been downgraded to number 2. Yeah, they're gonna have to change their mountain. We wanted to see some ghost towns and to experience firsthand the area that spawned so many marvelous stories of life, of successes, failures, and even death.
Well, and that's where 307 Adventures comes in. We take people to the stuff that isn't offered on the brochure for local tourism, because most of the time people will stay just inside of the little town that they're visiting.
We hadn't even left the pavement before we came across an old one-room schoolhouse. By the time this schoolhouse was built, the old outlaws were long gone. Wyoming is famous for energy. They produce 52 million barrels of crude a year. The next leg of our journey took us through miles of active pumps. Oil rigs coexist with a truly amazing find that has withstood the test of time. It's sad to think that so many will never take the time or have the means to visit this area. 20 miles northwest of Thermopolis, we discovered one of the area's most widely acclaimed rock etching sites. There was a beautiful, almost solemn air. We walked, we pondered and contemplated with reverent awe.
Hey, you seen my phone?
Now, some of our more recent predecessors seem to have found this site and added to it, or defaced it, as the case may be. Now protected, the over 300 etchings in the area just give us a glimpse of a once heavily populated civilization. There's no record of them, so no one really knows where they came from or where they went. We gazed in silent adoration at the peaceful representations before us.
Man, I've seriously got something in my shoe. Can you take a look at this?
Leaving the petroglyphs, we traverse a section of Wyoming's strangely beautiful Badlands. It's mind-boggling to think that anyone or anything could survive this lurid environment. That didn't seem to stop the 20,000 plus residents of Jibo, a once thriving city. All that's left today are the burned out rock walls and stories of strange lights in the ruins on dark moonless nights.
Many years ago in the 30s, there was a fully operational underground coal mine. Closed down. There was the guy that owned it, actually owned a couple other coal mines. There was a tragedy at one of them.
Mr. Jibo, the town's namesake, and a Mr. Frank partnered up and built a mining town in Canada. The town was destroyed when the mountain they were mining produced a rock slide that buried the town. It's a strange one because the miners were all safe, but the town was destroyed by the slide.
He wound up committing suicide from the stories that I've heard and been told. So, but what we get the opportunity to do is go out and see these old relics.
There's always a good mystery surrounding a ghost town, and Jibo is no exception. What's really sad is that this town is only 15 minutes off the main road, and so few people ever have the opportunity to see it.
When the territories of the Great West were thrown open, men of all kinds rushed in. Most came to settle peaceably, lured by free land, gold, cattle.
Wyoming's wealth of resources that include oil, coal, and grain were widely acclaimed as it became the 44th state in 1890. But the cattle industry, with its powerful land barons, were the real source of clout that helped push toward statehood. The state seal attests to the fact. Check out number 1 on the state seal. Yep, cattle trumps them all. The 1862 Homestead Act was an effort to bring in immigrants into the area. Not only was there free land to be had, but also any unbranded cattle were fair game.
A man could begin a herd with a maverick, an unbranded stray on the public range. By putting his brand on it, he owned it. Cattle barons had started their great herds with mavericks.
Landowners didn't take kindly to new homesteaders using the exact same law that they had. Count Otto Frank von Liechtenstein and his Pitchfork Ranch were no exception.
Now they fought each settler who tried to do the same. They fought to keep the settlers off the public lands, drive them from their homes.
The resources and beauty of this area were worth fighting for.
When the Wyoming big ranchers found guns were not enough, they used the Maverick Law, a law through which they appointed themselves commissioners with power to rule in the ownership of every maverick branded. A commissioner's ruling could declare the settler a rustler.
The story of Cattle Kate and her husband James Averill is a dark tale of greed and power. Cattle Kate was ambitious and smart. Her growing ranch was seen as a threat by some of the established barons. Another cattle baron, Albert Brothwell, had a favorite area to graze his cattle. Well, James and Kate started a legal homestead in the same area. Baron didn't own the land, but hey, he was using it. Kate had to go, and so began a world-class smear campaign. She's a prostitute that trades in stolen cattle. Now that one could get you hanged. On July 20th, 1889, Baron Brothwell and his boys did just that. They lynched Kate and her husband James without a trial. Brothwell and his boys walked. Not only that, but they wound up with Kate's land. And this event was one of the catalysts for the upcoming Johnson County War.
Consequently, the Stock Growers Association will now and publicly wipe out these thieves and anarchists.
Cattle barons like Otto Frank, owner of the Pitchfork Ranch, helped fund the Wyoming Stock Growers Association's effort in the war.
We are employing 50 men on the basis of $5 a day and $50 for every cattle thief shot or hung.
They bought hired guns, often with questionable pasts. They even gave them a cool gang name, the Invaders. They were given a license to intimidate or kill at their discretion anyone they thought to be a evil cattle rustler. Frank Canton built a reputation as one of the most infamous among them. But others like Tom Horn.
In 1903, One of the last great American heroes alive was Tom Horn.
Even as the war was winding down, Tom continued to pursue and eliminate so-called cattle rustlers for the association.
There won't be no more cows stolen. Not from the Wood River Cattle Company, the Bar 3 Cattle Company, or the Haley Cattle Company.
Steve McQueen is Tom Horn.
Tom Horn became expendable,
Who became a legend.
and he was hanged for shooting a 14-year-old boy in the back. We were headed for Kerwin, through the Wood River Valley to the land of gold and silver.
Kerwin is an amazing place with quite the history. Amelia Earhart was actually having a home built there.
It's kind of weird that Kerwin's modern claim to fame seems to be Amelia Earhart. She was just a baby as Kerwin was being established. The trail to Kerwin was a beautiful trip for our Jeeps as we crossed rivers and experienced the almost unbelievable conditions the miners had to travel. Kerwin was quite the little town. Miners and famous outlaws seemed to coexist. I mean, we're talking big names like Butch Cassidy, Tom O'Day, and Bronco Nell. Bronco Nell was one tough lady. She actually owned and drove wagons that hauled some major mining equipment up some very nasty roads. The town continued to grow until February of 1907. By the time Amelia was 10 years old, they were hit with a record blizzard. In one 8-day period, they were hit with 50 feet of snow. The mountains simply couldn't hold that much snow, and an avalanche broke loose and wreaked havoc on the town. The White Death of the Rockies was upon them. With the deaths and the impossible living conditions, it was more than the townspeople could take. When it was finally possible to leave, they did. The town was abandoned. By the 30s, the intrigue associated with outlaws and the Wild West generated a huge demand for experiences to play cowboy. And Amelia Earhart was drawn in a big way. On our way back down the canyon, we stopped by one of the famous dude ranches in the area, the Double D.
Amelia Earhart really loved the area, so she would come out here more frequently, and eventually frequently enough that she was having a cabin built. But when she was staying out here before having the construction of her personal cabin built, she stayed in the one that we're in now.
She spent some time in the area, but was never able to enjoy her cabin before she took her fateful flight. With the war and economics of the time, the Double D shut down the lodge and its ice water swimming pool. Today, there needed to be a new draw, something to continue to bring in truth seekers.
What's that say? Well, trying to go to red, but...
Anytime there are strange disappearances, ghost towns, and death, there are stories of the paranormal.
Hey, that's not right.
Using state-of-the-art smartphone app technology, we investigated.
Oh, it went to red right there.
Bingo. Proof of a presence. Was it Amelia? Or maybe it was that creepy chick that drove the wagons. I don't know, you decide. Kerwin and the Double D Ranch are known as some of the most active paranormal sites on Earth. We were told that our chances of experiencing a supernatural occurrence in Kerwin were exponentially high. These occurrences needed to be scientifically documented. But until we got home and reviewed our footage, we too were skeptical. Yes, it was kind of spooky. From start to finish, our 307 adventure was filled with history, beautiful landscapes, and wildlife. It's really amazing what you can see and where you can go in a Jeep.